Another day, didn't manage to go in the woods. Ended up having a bunch of other stuff to do. So I got all the gear that I have to get ready tomorrow. So tomorrow's gonna be the big prep day to get a bunch of stuff done, a bunch of my gear ready. Gotta get batteries charged, cameras ready to go, different cameras ready to go, underwater cameras ready to go, waders, boots, gear, get my license reprinted off because I lost it, and then get ready to rip. And then I'm gonna get up probably 5 in the morning and head out for the whole day, maybe 2. And we're gonna go into those coastal mountains and check some shit out. And maybe film some fish, catch one, and film some cool stuff, I hope. But anyway, in the meantime, what are you doing? What are you doing, adventure dog? I don't know if I'm gonna bring her or not yet. Don't know, we'll see. But I was going through emails from back to email 1 in Tell My Story, I think, to see if I've missed anybody. And sure enough, there's a whole bunch. So, here we go. Listen to these. From a Canadian Armed Forces veteran. I may have read this, I may have not have. Hello Steve, I've been listening to your videos for a while now. To give you a little background on me, I used to be a member of the Canadian Special Service Forces from 82 until 86 as a telecom tech. I was then sent to a special cryptology unit of the Canadian Forces, specializing in maintaining the secure equipment for the Canadian Forces and all the members of Parliament. My security clearance was top secret ATOML. This is the highest security clearance you can acquire within NATO. I was also sent on different missions throughout my career, UN peacekeeping missions in Africa and Cyprus, undercover telecom technician during the OKA crisis, that's the Oka crisis, and others I can't disclose because of the sensitive character of those missions. When I got out at the end of the 90s, I went to work as a security and email specialist for a huge international insurance company. Today I'm retired because about 10 years ago I was diagnosed with severe PTSD due to my missions in the Canadian Forces. By the way, I forgot to say that I had 2 encounters with them. I know what it is to see/hear them and not be able to speak about it. Speak now, man. Today I'm still in the process of recuperating from this PTSD condition. A few years ago I got involved with a service dog organization called Audemus. They are supplying service dog to those like me who suffer from PTSD. I'm now working towards getting my instructor's certification to be able to train the dogs and the veterans with PTSD to work together. While I was listening to your latest video, where you talk about the loss of your cousin and your favorite horse, I had an idea that I want to submit to you. Since there's a whole pile of people who have been traumatized from their encounters with Bigfoot/Sasquatch, the old man of the forest, a project that could help those with this type of encounter. This project would be to form some kind of organization which would help those who need to talk about those encounters, experiences, and help them cope with the past trauma. I'm pretty sure we could find some mental health professionals who would be willing to help with this. I'll just leave it at that for now and let you think about it. Now, about my encounters. I first learned about this phenomenon when I saw the Patterson-Gimlin film when I was about 17. To me, it was just something that people had made up. One day I told my mother, who was born in Cochrane, Ontario, about this film. She looked at me and she told me with her most serious voice, "What have you seen? What you have seen is the Wendigo. If you ever go in the woods and hear talking, it is the Wendigo calling you to take you to his lair. Beware, my son," she says. She never talked about it ever again until she died. My first encounter was in CFB Petawawa in Ontario in '83. I was on a winter warfare course, and part of the course was to be taken to a bare mountaintop by helicopter and live there for a week. Our bivouac was close to the Algonquin Park, which is a pretty remote place by itself. To make things more difficult, the temperature while we were there didn't go over -25°C, and that's without the wind chill factor. It was so cold that week that they closed the base only to keep essential services, but since it was a survival exercise, we stayed up there for the week. At night we had to go do guard duty to make sure everything was safe inside and outside the camp, and of course make us practice our defensive position. On one of my guard duty one night, I was doing my patrol around when I heard someone talking below our position. Then someone else answered. It was some kind of language I could not make out. It sounded like Japanese to me, but who in his right mind would come to such a remote place at -30 something just to test us around 2 a.m.? I went around the camp and made sure everyone was accounted for. The whole platoon was sleeping. I was the only one up. I returned to the defensive position I was at when I heard the voices. I listened and I heard the voices again. I then shouted, "Who's there? Advance and show yourself." Silence was the answer I got. I shouted again the same thing. I didn't get any answer back again. I had my assault rifle but no live ammo, so I did the next best thing I knew. I fixed bayonet and waited for someone or something to come at me. I stayed on guard for about an hour until I was relieved from my post. When my replacement showed up and saw me with the bayonet fixed on my rifle, he asked me, "What the F are you doing with that thing on your gun?" My only answer was that I was playing the real war game to keep me warm. I went to bed and that was it. I didn't mention anything on my report, didn't want to be tagged as crazy. My second encounter was the same year in CFB Wainwright, Alberta. I was part of a mobile repair team and was dispatched to a location with another tech to repair some communication equipment. We had the coordinates on the map and were looking for a trail to reach the destination. I was driving and my partner was looking at the map to guide me. I happened to look to my left. There was an open field about 500 by 500 meters, and on both sides the forest was quite thick. About in the middle of the field I saw a white-tailed deer munching on some leaves and watching all around. When he saw my truck, he stopped and started staring at us. I turned to tell my partner to look at the deer, and then I turned my head back to look at the deer. I used to bow hunt, at that time, and I was trying to estimate the distance and how I could get close to him if I was in a hunting situation. And all of a sudden, that thing came out of the woods like a rocket. It reminded me of a football player who was running to tackle the guy from the other team. It had the same shape too. That thing was huge and built like a bodybuilder. The color was dark brown, long arm, legs as big as a 45-gallon drum. The deer was still looking at my truck and never saw the thing coming. In a fraction of a second, the deer was grabbed up by the neck and loaded on the thing's shoulder. He returned to the woods as fast as he came. You know how big white-tailed deer can be in Alberta, so try to imagine grabbing hold of one by the neck, twist his neck at the same time you had to load it on your shoulder. All that while you run and don't stop. I asked my partner, did you see that? He quit looking at the map and told me, did I saw what? Never mind, I said. I knew too well not to try to explain the inexplicable. I kept on driving, and then we reached the destination. I didn't say a word until I came back to our base camp. I pulled my sergeant aside and asked him what would happen if I told him I saw something unusual in the training area. And he looked at me and said, Corporal, if it's going to give you an effing medal, tell me. If it's not going to get you an effing medal, shut the F up. Needless to say, I shut my pie hole and got back to what I had to do. After that event, I carried on with my career, did some United Nations missions where I saw pretty incredible things. I went to Africa on a real photo safari and saw probably every animal in Darwin's Book of Evolution. But this thing is nowhere. Something you can see in a zoo, and I don't think we ever will for a long, long time. So, think what you want, but it is what it is. You can use my name if you want. I don't have a career to lose anymore. Gaetan Lacasse. Gaetan, the part about picking up the deer and running with in Alberta, I remember reading this, but this was an email in the email today that hadn't been opened up, so I grabbed it and here we go, you guys. And I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard this, so there you go. Just so you know, an Alberta whitetail buck is probably going to be at least a minimum $200 live, up to 350 plus live. So you could safe to say at least that was a 200-pound chunk of meat that thing grabbed and killed. At the same time, it twisted its neck, putting it over its back and running, and did stop. Could you imagine? Just dragging one of those things for your average man is a bit of an effort, right? Share more, man, share more. If you come across more, and if you're still here, share more. And if you're still here, I wonder what your opinion of the NATO would be by now. That's a different topic for another time. Crazy, man. Crazy, incredible. Here's another one from the same deal. These are old ones that were marked as unread in my inbox. Recent Vancouver Island encounters. Hi Steve, I live on Vancouver Island. A few years ago in the fall, I was working on a trail near a salmon spawning creek. I suddenly felt the atmosphere change and everything went silent. I then felt feelings of dread and gut-wrenching anxiety, and the smell of burnt shit and rotting flesh permeated the area. Obviously, I got the hell out, not expecting anything good coming from that, whatever it was. I left the area without incident, returned to my car, and drove a short distance home to get my wife to go grocery shopping. Went to a local health food grocery store not more than a few miles from the area I was hiking. In the store, I felt restless because of what had just happened. I excused myself to my wife and left. As I walked out the grocery store, standing around the corner at the exit was about a 6'6", 350-pound figure. I noticed it, turned, and looked at me. It was clothed in a long, dark, heavy, knitted hoodie-like coat. Only his face is exposed. Time stood still as we stared into each other. His eyes were dark, skin very dark, mouth was very wide, nose broad and flat with black hair. He then looked through a window into the store at my wife, looked back at me and snarled. Steve, I didn't know what this thing was that followed me to town. I believe at the time it was some kind of demonic thing. So I carefully walked a few yards, distanced myself to regain control of my sanity that hasn't returned since. When I went around to look back at him, he was gone. I didn't know at the time, obviously this was a Sasquatch. This is a warning. His threatening attitude toward my wife was a message. I believe he must be trying to protect his family, and my not disclosing the location is important to him. Stronger things began to happen after these encounters. Example, encounters with a half-breed Sasquatch native girl and her, quote, handler, end quote. Encountered 4 UFOs that year hovering over my house, trying to hide in the clouds, witnessed by myself, my wife, and my daughter. The veil between our two worlds is getting very thin. Sincerely, Jay. Okay, Jay, this email sounded familiar too. This is a long time ago. But if you are still here, you said, quote, encounters with a half-breed Sasquatch native girl and her handler, end quote. Could you email us back with details on that statement that you shared in this email, please? I'd be very interested to hear that one, and everybody else would too. I mean, that's a big time attention grabbing statement, that sentence right there, all right, man? So if you're still here, please email me back with details on that one especially, and whatever else you've got since you first sent this email, okay, man? It's right in the backyard. I have a funny feeling this is up around Campbell River. Just got a funny feeling this is Campbell River. All right, next one, title. These are all from 2020, you guys, all right? I believe I heard him. Dear Steve, I'm a country girl raised in Sandy Mush, North Carolina, and I truly believe I heard him howling for 20 to 25 minutes around 1:30 a.m. in October 2013. I worked second shift, got off at 12:30, drove home as usual. Being a smoker, I went in, showered, put on my pajamas and my robe, and I went out on the back porch for a cigarette. At that time, had no pets, so I was alone. I'd been out there a couple of minutes and started hearing this long, groaning, deep-pitched moaning / howling that echoed through the mountains. It wasn't close, but no further away than maybe a quarter mile up in the mountains above my valley. Now, being one of those people who've had some strange paranormal things happen in my life, I was just stumped at this. I thought, oh crap, is that some kind of ghost or something? I've always thought Bigfoot is real, but it didn't dawn on me at that moment in the rural North Carolina mountains that this strange, far away but extremely loud groaning howl could be a Bigfoot. Oddly enough, it just kept going. It started kind of low, then built up to this long, roaring, almost mournful howl which could last at least 10 to 12 seconds each time. And every dog and kite within 1 mile of me was going crazy. I distinctly remember feeling that this was mourning, and it was very troubling to listen to, but I did. I had a flip phone back then, and it didn't even dawn on me to attempt recording on the old phone. It was just so strange, and apparently I'm the only person who heard that mess for at least 20 plus minutes, and I asked everybody. I know black bears don't roar like that, and neither do bobcats, foxes, or coyotes. It wasn't a wolf or anything I've ever heard before. I've since researched to see if anyone was doing Bigfoot research in the area and playing this sound over speakers, but no one seems to know anything about it. It's kind of funny because my great-grandmother talked about the hairy man to keep me and my cousin from wandering off into the mountains daily, which we did anyway. And ever since I was old enough to comprehend Sasquatch, I was convinced he was in places like Bluff Creek, Willow Creek, California, and in the Northwest states. But here in western North Carolina? I did hear a whoop late one night standing on Granny's back porch in '82. Too scared to go to the outhouse in the dark, and it sounded like a monkey. I was 14 then, but I still couldn't process the possibility of Bigfoot here. So I just thought, nah, must be a bird. I did not want to consider the idea since my cousin and I would have to walk out of the hollow well over 1/8 of a mile in the dark mornings to catch the school bus. And we're always hearing weird stuff and freaking out like regular teens, ha. We were brave in daylight though, and tomboy through and through. I wonder if he was watching us. Now I wonder if he was watching us all along and we were too busy swinging on grapevines and chopping through the steep, thick mountains with our flea market machetes to notice. It's just amazing that he sure made his presence known when I was in my mid-40s, standing on my own back porch. May have been the exact same one because my grandmother's house is just 1 mile over the hill from my house. And since that experience, I've YouTubed every animal sound you can imagine, and I was thorough too. Then I hit on one that was precisely what I heard that night. YouTube this: Clipper Mills CA, longest Bigfoot howls, some verbiage to this effect. The video is a couple and their dog late at night broke down on the side of the road. I'm telling you, as straightforward as I can be, cold chills went all over me when I listened to that. It's exactly the sound that is forever burnt into my memory. I'm convinced I heard Bigfoot too. I just wish my granny had still been alive, because she would have loved telling me, "I told you so." Thank you for sharing your stories and those of others. For some reason, we're just supposed to know. Sincerely, Darlene Maxwell. Appreciate it, Darlene. If you're still here, you've been here a while, and you know there is dozens and dozens and dozens of people right alongside you that heard the exact same thing. And I'll bet you those beings were watching you when you were kids without a doubt. 100% they saw you. Not a doubt. Thanks again for sending that in. I'll check out that recording too, myself. Steve, I appreciate all you do and the positions you take on all the bullshit. My name is Elliot, 33 years old. Use my name. No one's thoughts have ever hurt me. I've had premonitions now. It sounds insane that I know. It happened in different situations at a young age. I stopped someone mid-paragraph and word for word told them what they're going to say. It freaked them out, and me too. It happens in high-risk situations. I just know the wrong choice, and I made the choice to go a different path while doing something I shouldn't have been, smoking cigs. I was younger, but past early teen. I knew the point at which I was given a choice in direction. It was a memory, like a flashback, that I have done this. Went to the right and got caught. So I went left, smoked my cig, walked back. Didn't I meet the cops at the choice intersection, I would have gotten arrested and fined. More trouble than I wanted. But still to this day I have it. It hits me. I instantly change all my plans for the day because I know it will be bad. I've never had anything bad happen when I listen. I actually managed to avoid situations that went bad. I have no clue how, why, or when it will happen. As a kid, I also had sightings of a being off of predator, invisible, but there and then moving. I thought I was surely seeing things, going crazy. So I filed that away deep down. Only just remembered it. The rocks we were camping. Me and my girlfriend and our kids, 4 in total. We have seen your episodes. We went to fish at the creek. There were multiple rocks stacked all over the creek, and the night before at midnight, there was a significant amount of bird calls from in front and behind us as we sat at the campfire. Back to the rocks. I told the kids don't touch, so they made their own and knocked them down. Went back to our camp, and there was a stack of rocks on the stump at our camp. They were not there when we left. So I believe we were watched. I never let the kids break sight, and I had a 40 cal handgun and a 12 gauge in the tent with slugs and buckshot. I have no desire to shoot anything, but I have a bigger desire to save and protect my family. I live in north central PA, all woods. Thanks for all you do. You can share if you desire. Thanks, Elliot. I'm also interested in a way to help change in a bigger picture. It can't be hard to get a similar domain name, but different all in the same, like something different. I'd like to be willing to log domain name and fire up a platform and start entering all that. All right, man. I believe every man should be armed. Every family man should be armed when they're in the woods, or should have firearms in the house, as far as I'm concerned. You got family and children, you have the frickin' right to protect them. You should. I should send that in. Excuse me. This is titled My Great Uncle Roy and 40 Acres, El Dorado National Forest, California, Our BF Story. Hi Steve, I started watching your bear stories. I would literally laugh out loud. Although I'm not a hunter, I'm an avid outdoors mountain girl who commutes to San Francisco 4 times a week to watch Listen to your stories each of the daily 2-hour travels. I'm jealous of your backyard and commute on horseback or bush plains. What an adventurous life you are blessed. I straddled the fence telling my family's creature family story because, like so many, I was ridiculed and bullied about it through elementary school. I learned to only discuss with my family, which the adults still were somewhat tight-lipped when the subject was broached upon. Anyway, here it is. My dad's Uncle Roy is one of those off-color jokester storytellers. Although he and Aunt Frances raised my dad at age 15, another rabbit hole story, they didn't have kids of their own until they were older. By that time, my dad had 2 daughters of his own. Uncle Roy had 40 acres backed against the El Dorado Forest in Placer County, California, with a cabin, a big barn, and private, fully stocked catch-and-release bass pond. For as long as I can remember, I was born in '66, we would stay weekends and 2 full weeks in summers there, and Uncle Roy would always put out these big bags or boxes of apples and oranges and even big chunks of deer or wild boar meat that he and my dad hunted by the side of the big red barn about 300 yards from the cabin. And he said, "Never go near the barn at night." We kids never asked why. It was just known that we kids were not to leave the Babe Lincoln wood fenced area. Okay, that's probably a typo, and I think he meant the barbed wire wooded fenced area around the cabin once dark, not even to the outhouse after dark. Finally, when I was about 10 years old, me and my oldest sister asked why we weren't allowed near the back of the barn ever, and not allowed to go fish after dark. I will never forget his answer. Uncle Roy told us kids that, quote, "We share our land with another family, and we have an unspoken agreement, and this is our land during the day, weekends, and holidays, but it's their land at night and when we're away. That family will not bother us as long as we stick to the agreement. Don't be afraid of them, but never break the agreement, because they can be mean." Holy shit. "We all must share this land," end quote. He told us that this family are Sasquatch and have been on this land since he inherited it from his father and my great-grandpa over 40 years prior. Apparently my great-grandpa made this same arrangement with this family and started leaving food and meat for them only the beginning of the spring and the last day of fall. After my great-grandpa and great-uncles, including Roy, he was 12 or 13, were up there digging the bass pond with a big tractor, and this huge 10-foot creature covered in dark brown fur started shaking the huge 100-year-old oak tree. My great-grandpa froze as the creature ran back and forth from tree to tree, shaking them and screeching a high-pitched scream. Grandpa told my uncles, James 15 and Roy 13, to come closer to the tractor. They watched for about 3 minutes as the creature kept shaking the trees and screeching. Our families always had big hunting dogs, and all but one of the dogs cowered under a tree by the pond. But once the one bear hunting trained big 120-pound 3-year-old Weimaraner again, Weimeriemer, Teddy barked. The creature ran into the trees up the mountain, screeching towards where the barn was later built. The dogs always stayed outside on the porch of the cabin at night. The next morning, Teddy, Grandpa's best dog ever, was gone. They never found him. Never. They looked for Teddy for the 2 days, but had to go back home. And this was just a weekend/hunting property, but they'd owned it for 4 years, and Teddy knew the whole 40 acres of that property and marked every tree. Uncle Roy said Grandpa knew it was the creature who must have took and killed Teddy. When he got home and told my great-grandma, she went to sell the property, but Grandpa refused, and he said he'd handle it. 2 weeks later, Grandpa and my uncles returned to the cabin. They found huge footprints bigger than any human in freshly fallen snow all around the cabin and the tractor near the pond where they were digging. Grandpa, his last 2 dogs, both Walger hounds, and my teenage uncles lit a fire outside the cabin, sat with loaded hunting rifles on their laps, and waited all night for that creature. Around Early morning, 3 a.m. or so, Grandpa got frustrated and started yelling at the creature saying, "I know you're out here, I feel you. You've been watching us all night. I also know you killed my dog and you're mad that I'm digging up the land. But this here is my land now too, and I'm making a pond. I plan to stock bass and other fish which will only help feed you and yours. I'll tell you what, I ain't going nowhere. Me and my wife and kids will be coming here for years to come. We don't plan to bother you. You can have that mountain. We'll leave you to it. But you don't come near my cabin or shed. We don't go near your mountain. You have my word. We'll share this land." Uncle Roy said that while Grandpa was yelling this, that Uncle Roy and Uncle James heard trees shaking, and the hair on their necks stood straight up. Uncle Jimmy even cocked his rifle and aimed towards the mountain. Soon after Grandpa's speech, he got up and said, "Let's go inside and make some breakfast. He won't bother us again." Uncle Jimmy said he wanted to go home, but Uncle Ray could feel that his dad was right, and they never had a problem since. End o' email. How's that for a holy email? Wow. Wow. I'd love to hear more if there's any other encounters on that property. What happened today? What happened in the end? And if anybody else from those encounters may be following this channel as well, too. And I would be interested to know if anybody had more encounters elsewhere in different locations after that or since, right? That's something else. And it's not a first either. Next one is titled "A Woo Encounter" from John Blatt. "Hi Steve, after reading the woo encounter that I sent yesterday, if you feel it is too woo or strange and do not want to read it on your channel, I'll completely understand. I would not blame you. I've only shared it with a few close friends, and even then I was reticent to do so. Sharing the many high, strange experiences I've had throughout my life, maybe because of the face-to-face encounter, is just not received well by people who have not had similar type experiences. In some ways, I've gotten used to the ebb and flow of mysterious synchronicities, psychic phenomena, and strange paranormal happenings throughout the course of my life. Although I seem to be a magnet for weird occurrences and strange events, I feel like I'm a normal person. I mean, I've purposely sought out psychological evaluations and have always come out of them as a well-grounded and normal individual. I guess by being my own greatest cynic and skeptic, I have tried to see if I really do have something wrong with me or if I'm crazy for having these things in my life. Sorry for rambling, I just don't have others to talk about these type of things. I do have wonderful family and a few good friends, and they aren't really that interested in high strangeness, Sasquatch, or the paranormal. In many ways, I'm not either. It just happens to and around me, and I'm left trying to understand it and live with it. Thanks for listening. I don't expect a response, or especially for you to tell my story unless you really want to. It just feels good to get it out and talk about it. I've never wanted or expected to have these kinds of things in my life. Most people do not, and I can understand why people scoff and doubt. I would too if they hadn't happened to me. Sasquatch encounters are crazy for most people in the first place. Then add woo on top of it, and it just seems too fantastical for most rational humans. Do I experience woo encounters because I experienced them before and know it is real? Even though it is real, it doesn't necessarily make it easy to accept. The author, John Keel, said it best when he wrote, quote, "There is nothing so powerful as truth, and often nothing so strange," end quote. Thank you, Steve. All right, so that was an email. August 28th, 2020. And then we have another one, August 27th. All right, so this is the one you sent the day before. Get ready, here we go. "Hi Steve, I want to say thank you for reading my face-to-face encounter as a young boy. I did not know how therapeutic it would be for me to finally share that event in its entirety and be heard without being ridiculed or called a liar. I also never planned on sharing that event, in all strangeness, with anyone. But something inside me knew that I needed to share it with others at some point before I die. You gave me that opportunity, and I'm deeply grateful for it. You sharing it on your channel and receiving lots of positive feedback in the comments has helped me to not be so closed up and secretive about these events in my life. It's hard to explain, but I feel sharing that encounter has helped me to move forward in certain ways internally and open doors within me that I didn't know were there. What I'm trying to say is that it is a beautiful thing to be heard, especially when it involves something that, generally speaking, would normally bring you public shaming and ridicule. It doesn't really matter to me if skeptics believe that my experiences are real or not. At this point in my life, I feel that what really matters is just to be heard without being judged. It really is a precious gift. In a way, you are providing an invaluable service to people who have been shamed, laughed at, ridiculed, or merely having an encounter with one of these beings, and usually against their will. Having said this, I'd like to share an encounter I had about 15 years ago when I first moved here to the Pacific Northwest. My ex-wife, my young son, and myself had just moved to the area and were trying to figure out where we wanted to live. We did a lot of camping the first few months we were here, and we wanted to explore all the amazing places in the Puget Sound area. I really wanted to do some camping at Mount Rainier National Park, mostly because of my interest in Sasquatch. I'd read many encounters with these beings in and around the Mount Rainier area, and I knew they had a strong presence around the mountain. At the time, I still had a very strong fear of them and still consider myself an avid Bigfoot researcher. But I wanted to overcome my lifelong fear and try to reach out to them. Not the greatest idea, I know, but I need to overcome this obstacle in my life. I still periodically had nightmares of Sasquatch, and I truly wanted to be done with them. I'd always felt that these beings had psychic abilities, and after years and years of reading others' accounts of paranormal or psychic interactions with them, I felt that reaching out to them in a psychic way was probably the only way to actually have interactions with them. So, we traveled down Route 410 next to the White River, northeast of Mount Rainier, and found a beautiful area to set up a tent and camp next to the river. It was so beautiful. The area where we set up our tent was pristine, clear, flat ground. This detail is important to the story, as you will see later. Nestled within the majestic hemlock trees. It was about noon when we set up camp, and throughout the day I was sending a message out with my mind, or trying to send a telepathic greeting, introducing myself and telling anyone that could hear me that I was a friend and wanted to say hello. I invited the Sasquatch people to come and visit us, yet I did ask them not to scare us because I was trying to overcome my fear of them. I said all this in my mental projections into the forest. All that day and into the early evening, I would periodically send out these friendly messages, with some trepidation I might add. I felt nothing in return. I didn't sense anything unusual or odd. Everything seemed peaceful, and I had serious doubts that these messages were even being received. Evening came, and we had dinner and enjoyed a nice campfire. It was in the late spring when this took place. We soon felt sleepy and set in for bed. My ex-wife and my son fell asleep almost immediately, and before I dozed off in my sleeping bag, I wanted to try one last time to send a friendly message. I started telepathically sending my greetings, and something very strange happened. It was very hard to articulate into words, but I'll do my best to describe it. I felt this sort of connection with something after about 20 seconds of my message. It was like being hooked up to a psychic battery or something like this, as there was a very strong surge of energy, and I received a picture in my mind of a face. And it looked like a typical Sasquatch face, but it was very intense. Instantly, it started to communicate with me, not in English words, but in feelings. It was so intense that it hurt my mind, and after about 5 seconds, I had to disconnect mentally. After it was over, I laid there in my sleeping bag in a sort of disbelief. What the F just happened? Was that really them? Did I just somehow make all that up? I laid there for probably 30 minutes or so having this internal debate with myself, wondering what the hell that was. I did feel like there was a message coming back to me, but I did not understand it. After a while, I ended up falling asleep. Sometime later in the night, I was suddenly awoken by something. I didn't hear anything and couldn't see anything because it was pitch black out. I lay there trying to listen to any possible noise or movement outside. The next thing that happened, I felt the top of the tent being pushed down from above. My ex-wife and son were lying right next to me, and I knew that they were still asleep and were not moving. The tent was slowly being pushed down from the outside, and I became petrified. My first thought was that it was a crazy human being trying to get into the tent and get us. I did not instantly think it was a Sasquatch, but another human with a possible horrible intent. For some reason, I instantly called out to Sasquatch to help us. With all my might, I shouted out a telepathic message for their assistance, and I projected my need to them. And instantly, that intense connection happened again, and the face was there. But this time, the communication was understandable. It was kind of like a mental download at first. I instantly knew that the one communicating with me was a leader of a clan of Sasquatch, and that they had heard my messages the previous day. The sense I got from them was that they were perplexed and amazed that a human had made contact with them in this way, as they had never experienced a human reaching out like this before. So, they were very intrigued and curious about this human. He told me, and it was a he, that they heard my request to visit, and so they did. The clan wanted to see the human who could do this. This, of course, kind of terrified me, but before I could adequately respond, this being said to me, "We know that you are afraid, and we think it is admirable of you to try to contact us in a friendly manner, despite your deep personal fear of us." With that, I felt the pressure relieved off my tent, and the being told me that I do not need to be afraid. One of them wanted to wake me up, but not by making noises. They just wanted my attention and not to wake everyone else up in the tent. I then felt this peace come over me, and the voice said, "We will watch over you and your family tonight. You'll be very protected, so rest well and thank you for your messages." The connection was broken at that point, and it was over. I heard nothing outside but the river in the distance. I lay there again thinking to myself, did I just lose my mind? Did I just make all that up in my head? That had to be real, right? I honestly didn't know what to think about it, but still felt this great peace, and sometime soon thereafter I fell asleep. That morning I was the first to awaken with a full bladder, and I had to go pretty bad. I immediately thought about the events the night before, and again did not know what to think about it all. Was that real? Well, at that moment I had to pee like a racehorse and carefully got out of my bag and unzipped the tent to get out. I stood up looking outside in the early morning light, and I gasped. My gasp woke my partner, and she said, "What is it? What's wrong?" All I could say was, "Look at this." So she got up, looked outside the tent, and directly to the east of the tent, about a foot away, was this little trench that was dug into the ground. It was about 3 inches wide, 3 inches deep, and about 8 feet long, gouged into the ground. A straight line. My ex saw it and gasped herself. That wasn't there last night, and she was right. The whole area where we had set up the tent was clear and unblemished. It was why we had set up the tent in that location. Sometime during the night, this line was dug into the ground. There were no fallen tree branches or any logical way to explain how that trench was placed there in the middle of the night. I looked all around the area for any tracks or signs of anything, but there was nothing. I still have no idea why that was placed there during the night. Was it a line of demarcation? Do not cross this line? Was it placed there to help me realize that I did not make this up in my head? I tend to believe that it was the reason behind it. I told my ex-wife all that had happened to the previous night, and after seeing the trench for herself, she believed me. She told me that later the previous evening she felt like she was being watched, but disregarded it. Is there any proof of this encounter? No, it's just my experience. It's not meant to try to convince anyone, and I don't doubt that there will be lots of naysayers who will crap on this woo encounter. I know it happened to me, and I'm very mentally stable, happy individual. I know it's hard enough for people to believe in the existence of Sasquatch itself, let alone an encounter like this. That reality is not lost on me. I am my own greatest critic and skeptic, yet I swear on my life that this is true, and would be happy to take a polygraph test over it. I have 2 other encounters that are somewhat similar to this one, both of which were more unnerving than this one. It is not easy to share these things because I understand how it may seem to others who haven't experienced anything close to this. Psychic phenomena itself is ridiculed by most people, so much more a psychic interaction with the damn Sasquatch? So how much more a psychic interaction with the damn Sasquatch? If it hadn't happened to me, I would be skeptical too. Thanks to you for allowing me to share my crazy experience. Again, I'm not trying to convince anyone here. I'm just sharing this to possibly help others who have had very woo experiences, and for them to know that they are not alone. Hopefully my encounters will encourage others to tell their extra weird Bigfoot experiences too. Bless you, Steve, and all that you do. Bye for now, John Black. Okay, there you go. John, I'm sure you must still be here. I hope you're still here with us. And if you are, well, hello, Mr. Owlman, the Arizona 4, to mention a couple that have had basically the same and more go on with them too, right? And you guys are all unrelated. And many other people. So frickin' interesting, right? Everybody ask yourself, what would you do if that happened to you? What would you guys do? Everybody, what would you do? Just picture it. Just for a second. Just picture being in a tent or a camper in the middle of nowhere, camping or whatever, and all of a sudden something shows you basically a image of its face and communicates with you in your head. Holy shitskis, right? How would the average person handle that? Especially if you've never heard anything remotely close to that ever before in your entire lifetime. And all of a sudden, bam, in your face. Something else, right? Something else. And it's something else to come forward and admit that happened and talk about it openly and publicly. Nobody would do that 10 years ago, 15 or more, right? At least finally you can here anyway. I'd be interested to hear from you again, man. What's up today? How's it going today? Anything new happen lately? In the recent past, you know? I'd like to hear back from you if you want to email me one day again. It's quite the share. All right, I'm going to share one more, and this is from back then as well, 2020. I'm going to get moving. I got animals to feed. It's actually the evening right now. Sun's going down, and it's freezing in here. Excuse me. This is titled Encounter Question Mark. Hi Steve, my name is Annie Greer. You can use my name if you wish. I'm 63 and I don't care who knows what I think or believe. You're a free woman, Annie Greer. I want to thank you all. Thank you for all you do for all the people that need help on this subject. I told you about friends in California at the time of the Patty film that was run out of their home due to rocks pelting their house. Not sure if it's the one on TV because I was 10 at the time. I think that I had a couple of encounters in my life that I tried to rashly put two things going on in my life. First time I was 14 and younger brother 13 running around in the woods behind our home in Salinas, California. 20-minute drive from town. We were hunting with a rifle, pellet gun, LOL. It took both of us together to pump it up. What big brave hunters we were. Anyway, we crossed the barbed wire fence at the back of our property. We were about half a mile into the woods. As we were heading back home, I heard someone following us. I thought it was a person because the walking sound was bipedal. It would stop and we would stop. I whispered to Billy what I was hearing so he would pay attention to it also. I told him out loud that we should go pump up the gun to the point that it would penetrate the skin. To tell the truth, we were scared to death. After a gun was pumped up, we started moving again. So we walked fast because we were taught not to run. I also said out loud, so whoever or whatever was following us, that I would shoot if they would come too close to us. I also told my baby brother that if it came to it, he was to run as fast as he can home and to not look back because it would slow him down to get help and I would be right behind him. I'm the one with the gun. I was willing to stay and fight as best as I could to save my baby brother. Once we got back to the barbed wire fence and crossed over, whatever or whoever it was stopped following us. We never did see who or what it was. I know that some people had bad experiences, but maybe they will get some humor out of two kids trying to be brave for the other one. The only really scary part is that my brother would not have run away like I wanted him to. Once again, Steve, thanks for being you. No nonsense type of guy. P.S. I'm not afraid of the woods. I love camping in the woods. There is all kinds of animals in them that can hurt you if you're not paying attention out there. They just want to be left alone to live their life. Always remember there is home. Always remember that it is their home you are entering. So be respectful when you're there. All creatures have their own individual personalities just like people. Sometimes I like animals more than people because they don't do things out of malice. I don't believe they are animals. All right, there we go. Followed yet again with bipedal footprints. said 250,000 people times 10. Maybe, right? Anyway, there we go. Might be short today, I don't know, but I gotta get ripping. I'm gonna go feed the animals, make sure the batteries are charged, get the day tomorrow's gonna be for firewood and getting all of my gear set up to head off into the mountain, the river, and then come back, give him a report, and hopefully I'll rip some videos out, some shares out there too, and set up the camera in a creepy place. Why? I don't know why. I just do it. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know why I do it, but I'm gonna do it.